Today I'm talking to the lovely Ricki Spencer, and without further ado, hi Ricki.
Hi AJ, always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast today.
It's always great to see you too. I love the outfit.
Thank you. Look, I wanted to wear something colourful, and I wanted to just to sort of bring my mood up to that feeling that it's summer. I want to enjoy the beautiful weather that, I'm currently on Wurundjeri land out here in western suburbs, West Footscray in Victoria. So I just thought it's the middle of summer, and I'm so excited to be speaking with you.
No, beautiful. I might as well start off a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm 54. I was born in the 60s, late 60s, to what I thought were European family. But from a very early age, I noticed that I really didn't fit into that family. So there were a lot of issues, and there was a lot of hatred too expressed by my parents, who really just had a hatred of darker skinned people. And I never understood that. And I remember as a child being at that stage in the 70s, where corporal punishment was allowed, I would always be hit every time I went outside in the sun. And I never understood. I was told not to go because my skin would get very dark very quickly. And I would get then hit for that. So I was always told, no, you've got to stay inside the house. You'll get sick. You cannot go outside. And I never understood that, yet my sense of self always wanted to be outside, and I always wanted to run away. So there was an issue there. Obviously, I could sense that something was not right with this family unit. And it wasn't until later on that I found out later in my life that I was adopted, because I never really looked like them, although I was similarly, I did have certain features. But then I found out through a relative that that my mum was actually an Indigenous young girl and of underage, and that I was at that time the Catholic Church was quite, as we know, very privileged, and also had a lot of power. And we know that the welfare system up till the 70s, even went up a bit further, but especially in the early 70s, the idea was that if a child was born to an Indigenous unmarried woman, especially underage, and the baby was fair-skinned, the best thing you could do was to remove that baby and put that in a family that were non-Aboriginal and raised as within those dynamics to, kind of to falsify the birth rights, but also they thought at the time, oh, well, that's a better outcome for that child. We now know that's not the case, and trauma is something that I've gone through a long time and suffered throughout my life because of this. And so my life in that was fractured as a result of that. And
now, how old were you? How old were you when you found out you're adopted?
I knew I was adopted when I was in my teens, because I'd have a lot of arguments, and my parents they would always say things like, "We'll send you back," and I didn't know what that meant, but I worked it out, But in my mind, I kind of got that sense, okay, and so the way things were done in the family unit, I would never sit with the family, I'll always be else. So you kind of was excluded in many ways like that. It wasn't until in my 40s, early 40s, I think it was, that before my, I thought was my uncle passed away, and his daughter sat me down and sort of said, look, we think it's wrong that, that this is what's happened. And the young person was born in suburbs near where my parents lived, and it was part of the church because, well, at that stage, the church welfare was very strong. And remember, these were the western suburbs. This was a time that if you were, anyone who was Aboriginal at that time, if you had a baby, and of course underage at that stage, it was really taboo. So they tried to do as much as they could. I don't even know the full extent of the process. All I know is that the certificates and everything were falsified. So I was said that I was born at home, and you think to yourself, well, how does, I just didn't question it. So I then, when I got that, I kind of felt a bit taken back, but relieved, because I always had that feeling, because growing up, I always had this idea that as a young baby, I do remember seeing a woman, darkish haired woman, but I never understood that. So I don't know if it's a spiritual awakening. I can't say, but that to me has haunted me and lived with me, and sort of been sort of threaded through my thinking for a long time. So then at that stage, and it all came about because at that stage my father had died, and my mum still alive. I haven't spoken to her in 8-9 years, so I don't know if she's still alive, but she didn't want to say much, but there was always that element of, I don't want to talk about it, you are who you are. And then it was the rest of my family who said, who kind of wanted me out of the picture at that stage, because it became about money and property. And they said, you're not really part of the family, you're not really blood. And then, you just, and I won't use the expletives they used. So obviously they knew. And and it was like, in one way, it was a relief for me, because I never fitted in. They never accepted me when I, at that stage, lived within the gay realm, because I took that identity, because that's all I could know of comfort, where I could feel a sense of belonging. And then once that happened, I then had a deep thought to myself, and I thought, what am I going to do? Because there's so much to process. Where do I go? Where do I start? And I kind of didn't know. I just sat with that information, for a few years, because I thought, what am I going to? Where do I go? I was just dealing with the trauma of just not knowing who I was, trying to process that, to finally have that recognition. It kind of makes sense, and obviously I've been seeing a psychologist for many years and psychiatrist. So having took many years to process, who am I? Through that intensive kind of processing, I realized that my whole life I have been living a lie in terms of my identity. I shrouded my femininity, thinking I'll situate myself within the gay space, but really I was never comfortable in that space either. So when I finally allowed myself to express myself in my authentic identity of being my true self, which I feel as though my brain is female, I started to accept that. And when I started to accept that, everything started to come into place. And I started to process that, to kind of go through that, and then start identifying, and coming out and thinking, yeah, I'm proud, of my heritage, and thinking, well, how am I going to go about finding my mum? So I did a few inquiries, and it was quite difficult because of the time, and when you don't have names, all you have was times. And, I thought, well, what do I do? What happens if they reject me? What if, so this is the complexity, I think, AJ, too, is that I think sometimes people assume that, it's like on television, you find your DNA, go and search it. It's not just a piece of paper or finding it's a whole, I guess it's a whole, I can't even have the word for it. Do I want to destroy in my head the possibility of some type of connection? Yeah. Because what if that connection does not go well? All the people in that family don't want nothing to do with me. So where do I go from that? Being rejected by adopted, then rejected by biological, and then also being rejected from your affirmed Black community because you don't fit what they think you should be.
Yeah. You talked about identity a number of times. How do you define Ricki?
Yeah, that's a question that I'm always filtering through. Where do I fit? And it's for me is, well, firstly, I see myself as a person, a trans woman, adopted trans woman. And my soul, I do believe with all my heart, I know I'm Aboriginal, at least on my mum's side. That I feel it, and no one can take that away from me. I don't know who the father was, and that was what makes it difficult. All I know is that he was an older person, I think in his late 20s, early 30s. So you have that sort of thing. So I'm somebody who's fractured. I don't really know. I don't have family. I'm somebody living with a number of disabilities, physical and psychological, dealing with trauma, dealing with post-traumatic stress. But I'm also someone who I think is resilient in that I want to make a difference in the world, because I have this, I guess, this dream, and I don't know if it's selfish or narcissistic, that maybe if I can make a few changes in the world, maybe when I do find my family, that they will accept me, that they can think that you've done a lot of good for the community. And maybe that's, I don't know if that's colonialism or I don't know, but that's what's getting me through, because I'm feeling if I can be a good person and do good things and help out in the community, maybe that the universe will reach out and help me find my birth mum and help me reconnect. Because I think that's so important, but it will happen when it will happen. And the thing is, I don't want to be pushed or guided or threatened, via lateral violence into doing that. But yet this is still what takes place. And what's so upsetting for me is it happens, well, I couldn't believe it, within the Black queer community. I cannot believe it. I expected it from perhaps, I thought, the wider community or the wider privileged gay community, but no, it just seems like it happens on all levels. I'm not black enough to be black. I'm not white enough to be white. So it's like, where do I fit? And because I'm trans, so I don't fit the binary notion of gender. I'm old. I'm not slim. So you don't fit into the projected ideal citizen. So I guess I'm just a meshing of intersectionalities rolled into this embodiment.
To create the wonderful Ricki Spencer as we see her right today?
It's, for me, darling, I'm happy where I am, and I am who I am now, and I live with that, and I have my conscience is knowing that I'm being the best person I can be, and that to me is what makes me in 20, in this age, in this time, and in this space.
Now, I do know that you have done teaching, haven't you? Did you?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. Yes.
I also know that you found it a bit difficult to find work as well. What were some of the barriers?
Sure. So when it comes to teaching, and I think a lot of people may not realise that there's this kind of contested space, that, what I mean by that in the media, that they always say there's a teacher shortage. But what they're really saying is there's a shortage of teachers in who they need, who they want, which are young, binary identifying, cisgendered male and female. There is no space for people like myself who are transgender. So when I started teaching, I presented as a gay male. Well, I never said I was gay, but I guess they might have suspected that. and work was okay. Although when I did a lot of contract teaching, so a lot of my work would be going into schools, and then I'd always notice that people would never sit near me in the staff, like men. No male teacher has ever sat next to me in a staff room. Female teachers would, but never a male. So I presumed that there was some, and I thought to myself, oh, because I knew in myself something was wrong. I knew I wasn't being my authentic self, because part of the ethos of teaching is that you are to bring out your authentic self. But I was living a lie in that I was a transgender person presenting as a gay male, and I wasn't, and that made it really difficult. So when I finally dealt with it, and I told the schools and the agency that I worked through that I was transgender, they said, yeah, that's fine. So I thought, oh, but then the work just dried up, and I thought, oh, that's strange. And then I applied for over 50 positions. Now I've got 3 degrees, I think, at that stage. So I got more Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Social Work, but Bachelor of Education, Masters of Education, at that stage, and a graduate diploma in community development. So I had all these, and I'm thinking, what is it? And I was going to these interviews one after the other, and I'm thinking, oh, is it my age? Is it the fact that I have my stick? So I'm thinking, oh, maybe. And then I realized, oh my God, it's because I'm trans, because I had 2 people in 2 schools say, Ricki, we would love to hire you, but, we just can't guarantee your safety. We feel that the parents, it would be problematic for you. You'd be put into compromised situations. Maybe come back once you've had the operation. And I'm like thinking, oh, I'm like, so what? I'm not female enough. And I'm thinking, why does so it comes back to the culture of passing. Obviously, I didn't pass what they perceived as female, and they thought that was too problematic. Because schools are very much on a heteronormative, based on heteronormative systems. The way boys uniforms, girls uniforms, even the way we know all that. We don't have time to go into it here. So this has made me frustrated and made me feel, again, another thing of rejection. So, okay. So now I'm rejected as a teacher. I'm not good enough. And then people were saying to me on the side and friends, maybe you've got to go and do your PhD, because if you do your PhD, then your voice will be listened to. And that really upset me. So I started this journey of doing my PhD. And it infuriates me that, well, how much is good enough? Am I ever going to be good enough to go into a school and hired just for being me? When you say, who's Ricki? Because quite clearly, no. And it's like, how much do you have to prove to people who you are? That. And it's like, if you don't fit what their perception of what you should be like, and I wouldn't say it's unconscious bias. I just think it's deliberately, we don't want to have somebody like that in our school, because we don't want to deal with any sorts of ramifications, and it's just so sad. So I get that discrimination, and it's like, it's disheartening, because I spent 20 odd years in the social work field, working many systems, got retrained as a teacher, doing the 4-year, not the 1 year, but the 4-year course at my time, then doing the master's upgrade for 2 years, now doing the PhD, and still, there's this problem of, and I'd sit in interviews where there was dead silence, and you feel so bad, because you think, what do you hate about? Like, which part of me do you really hate the most? Is it because I'm transgender? Is it because I'm 54? Is it because I'm disabled? Which ones? Or is it a combination of all? I just don't fit what your ideal presentation of a binary teacher to be. So that's where I'm at today. That's why I've now focused on being involved in community activism and helping out there. And, my love of teaching has to be one step away from the classroom, and it has to be through the lens of research, because until we can change that and make more of an awareness that if you want to increase teaching, encourage people with diversity in your classrooms, have older people in your classrooms, have people with disabilities working in your classroom, have transgender and queer teachers working in your classroom. Does it really matter? Because what do they presume that kids are all one? All kids are different, all different diversities and intersectionalities as well. We are just a mirror of society. So wouldn't it make more sense to show the diversity of your teachers as your leaders, to then show young people that you can be who you are? To be a good person means just to do things, and live within the realms of, fairness and work within community spaces. Why do we have to just present something that's unrealistic?
Do you think we'll ever get to that point?
I've thought about this deeply, and I have to say, I cannot see it happening for at least a decade or two. It's not an easy thing to do because we have waves, what I call waves of ideologies that come through. We have the right, we have the left, and we have the centre right, we have the centre left. Schools are one of the last agents in society where power is kind of vested into how the society wants its citizens to be a certain way. And I don't think all of society is ready to embrace the diversity of having trans and gender diverse people in positions of power, because the old guard is so enmeshed in systems of binary and everything we do, that the idea of it's just so there's just too many layers of belief systems, and everything has been so embodied and invested through the foundation of binaries of male and female and heterosexuality, and the consumption of everything around that to change that, I don't think it would happen that easily. It's too much of a fear for neoliberalist economies and societies to kind of move away, because they really need the idea of population growth and and it boils down to that. And here I am saying that argument, it kind of goes, the whole system has been designed around this, and alternative, which is still seen, it's selling as not as another variant, but as an alternative, is seen as just the other. We are still seen as the other. So I have to say, I cannot see it. All I can see what's happening, there may be more acceptance, but I would say to you, until we have more leadership teachers who are trans, gender diverse in leadership positions, and I mean as in principals, and perhaps even, dare I say, an education minister who is trans or gender diverse, in that sort of figurehead position, I would say no.
Yeah. You're involved in a number of causes and a number of different areas where your voice is starting to be heard. What are some of the places that you actually are working in?
There's a few. One of them that I'm really passionate about at the moment is in digital health. This is something I'm really strong. So I'm involved with the Consumer Health Forum, which is part of the Digital Health Agency of Australia, where we look at how to improve the lives and well-being of, especially from people from marginalised groups and segments in society, people out in regional, rural spaces, using technology as a way to bridge the gap into better health outcomes, because we know that technology is helping manage to optimize our health. The way we do healthcare is changing. So that's one area. So I'm involved with a few hospitals in Melbourne where we look at that, and I'm on committees and we're looking at trialing different ways of bringing in using digital interfaces in primary care. And then what we then do is go to community and talk about it, and then skill up people in communities to embrace that. First Nations communities, people with disabilities, people who are transgender diverse, or people who perhaps don't have a good experience with health. So there's that side. I also am involved in a lot of spaces that are lobbying the government to reform the way health care processing works for people who are transgender diverse. It's not just about changing forms, it's about changing the way education, the culture, and the implications of that. So when you talk about that, there is a lot of things on My Health, which is the government, as you know, space where people call their information. There's a lot of issues there around privacy, around capturing data, merging data when you have information about yourself that's not consistent, and dealing with the changes. So there's that. Working with aging, which is another thing which is big on my agenda, with housing for the age action group. A lot of community education in that space, looking at reforming housing, affordable housing for older trans and gender diverse people who struggle with getting affordable and secure housing, who may not necessarily have been able to capture the ability to save or have the capacity to work in ongoing work, especially like if you're like myself and you don't get hired ongoing, you cannot get a mortgage, and there's a certain age at which you cannot get a mortgage. So you've got to look at those. So what do? You have to then rely on a rental. So there's that space. There's the palliative care space that I'm now involved with, which I'm looking at advanced care planning in Australia. How can we make advanced care planning, especially for First Nations people who are LGBTIQ, people with disabilities, people from different cultural diverse backgrounds, the importance of planning, your wishes, how you wish to be buried, how you wish your palliative care to be enacted with dignity, whether you want to be named a certain, how you wish to be perceived in that space, whether you're as male or female, or gender diverse, whether you want to be buried a certain way. Those sorts of things I think are important, that for many people in communities that I'm interconnected with haven't had those conversations. So that to me is important. So housing, digital health, education, with Social Education Victoria and then Special Education Association. So I'm looking at ways to, how can we make education more equitable? How can we make it so that young people are missing the gaps? So I'm especially looking at young people who are transgender diverse. Again, also looking at people with disabilities, that intersectionality. Those to me are sort of the common threads of what I do. And of course, my politics, I'm heavily involved with the Greens. I'm now the Australian social media manager for the First Nations Greens. So I'm conscious about how can we get more people to understand truth, treaty, and justice through the lens of the policies that look at how do we rebalance back and understand sovereignty, understand the complexities of law, and how law in itself is biased. It's designed so certain people, certain groups in society are marginalized and don't have access to certain resources and services. So I work in so many different spaces, and now no to violence. which I'm very passionate about, because I feel that, my experience of violence, it's been physical and lateral violence that I've just experienced, a few times. That has an impact on people's lives. I want to ensure that, to talk to organizations, how can we work with each other as human beings, more effectively? Why can we not bring back care into how we interact with each other? We should not resort to physically or verbally threatening each other if we don't agree with something. If you don't like me, that's okay, but use language and body language to reinforce that without having to somehow harm me because you don't like my philosophy or you don't like the way I look. We've got to work out better ways of communicating and working together.
Do you find lateral violence high in the trans community?
Yes, because a lot of it is unreported. And I'm going now on my own experiences and also some of the work I've done with collecting some data that I was working on a project where I was speaking to a lot of older trans women who had experience with relationships, especially women who date cisgendered men. There's a lot of, because when you're in that kind of dynamic, you're dealing with a lot of discrimination and tabooness, as I call it, within we're so bombasted with heterosexuality and what binary notions of male and female are, that for a lot of families, there's one thing to come to terms, and I call it come to terms with, to say someone affirms themselves as transgender. You don't see it celebrated. I always say this now to people. It's like, when people have birthdays, young children, you celebrate, oh yeah, happy birthday. No one celebrates, oh, my child's transgender. Oh my God, yes, let's have a big party, celebrate. It's seen as something, oh, okay, it's something that has to be corrected, or it's something that has to be, dealt with, as opposed to say, okay, that's just another presentation of the self. We're still like that. So then, we have the situation where families are so used to seeing things, because you see, I call it the mirrored effect. You kind of are more comfortable with the way you see others similar to yourself. So some families just don't know how to deal with it. And so what we find is that relationships are based mainly in private, enclosed situations. Men feel uncomfortable with it because men might be attracted to a trans woman, but then they can't. They're complicated. For some are complicated. I think it's to be gay because then they're so constricted in labeling. We label everything in the world. We create, and I have a problem with Google because Google reinforces that. People don't see the power of Google. Google just reinforces stereotypes and binaries, and people Google, am I gay? If you put that, a lot of hits, and if you do an analysis of that and you put am I gay and trans, I had sex with a trans woman, and you'd see all these hit, thousands and probably millions hits, because sexuality is a diverse expression of human nature. I see this as just a natural way of how people are. But we put labels, we put constraints, and this causes so many problems. And you see, I could talk for hours on this, but I can't. But this is the thing you see, AJ. People, in that space. So trans women tend to then have to be the counselors, the healers of these men. They get into relationships with men who cannot deal with the emotion. So some of these men don't know how to process that emotion. So they go back to physically and that would be either through violence, through or shoving, or through projecting their discomfort and their fears, because part of violence is that whole element of fear. If I fear something I don't know, how do I react to it? Well, I resort to hitting back, and it goes back to childhood and the way we see, how to protect yourself from something that you feel is unknown or unpleasant. So you have all these sorts of factors. So then where does trans women go with something? The services aren't geared towards supporting people like us. You know, we can't go to a women's refuge because, quite frankly, they're going to say, well, you're not female if you haven't had surgery. So you're dealing with all those issues. You know, police, you know, it's taken so long over the years to finally get queer liaison officers, but there's still that element where, you know, if you don't have your information of who you are, and there's this thing of, you know, do I want to expose myself to really, do I want to get the person in trouble because they'll come after me or the family will come after me? You have all these elements. So, you know, and that's why I got involved in the No to Violence campaign, because I want to make a difference in that space. You know, I've been physically abused. I mean, I remember quickly an example in 1991, and this is when I was still presenting as a gay male. I went out to Chapel Street, which is at that period of time a very gay area. So I was like 20, I think, at that time, or something really young. And I was with a friend of mine. And I remember quite clearly that, you know, and at that stage, I was not promiscuous at all, because, again, my gender, I was more about just wanting to be happy and dance and that. And I remember being with a friend outside. I don't know, there was something like a pub. I can't remember. We had a hot dog or something, sitting there. And this guy came from nowhere out of a car, and he had an axe in his hand. And he came up to me because we were both sitting down, you know, he's standing up, and he just said some horrible words I can't remember. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to kill me because he's standing over me. Now, these are the sorts of trauma experiences. Now, obviously, I looked too feminine, because I probably did. In those days, I was slim, I was blonde, I was, you know. And I remember, where do I go with that? You know, where do I process that? Who do I go for help? And luckily, he walked away, because there was, at that stage, because police would always patrol that area. And I thought to myself, I could have been killed, like a hate crime. So that's just one example of many that people like myself have had to deal with, you know, just the way we look, the way we present. And for me, that's been my common theme throughout my life. You know, just the way I present is problematic for people. They hate it. They don't like it because they don't understand it. You know, the color of my skin. If I was darker skinned, stereotyping of what you think an Aboriginal person should look like, then perhaps things would be different in that respect. But then I'll be dealt with the overt racism that goes along with it. So, you know, I think that's the problem we have, AJ. Well, for me, and my themes have been around the way one presents themselves and is perceived by the other. You know, has this power thing that we don't like. We don't like something we don't understand. Yeah. What do? We've got to do something about it, because we can't accept it, because we want to fight for power. We don't want to give up something that we feel that we've constructed that we're going to lose. And that's what it boils down to. Some people find me threatening, or they think I've got too much of a voice. I've been told, you've got too much of a voice. I've been told, you've got to go back and decolonialize yourself. I've been told, you've got to sit back and get privilege given to you. And I'm thinking, but all my life, I've never had privilege given to me. I never sat at the table with my family. I never got Christmas presents so I've never, ever had privilege. Maybe I've had pale skin. Maybe I've had to get education and a bit of work, but I've never been accepted in terms of interpersonal groups or belonging. And that's probably the key word I haven't said until now. And just speaking to you, it's just reminded me, that's the key word. I have no sense of belonging still. I'm kind of like at the sea, swimming along. I'm surviving. I'm keeping afloat, but I don't have no sense of belonging, because no one's reached out their hand and said, yeah, come with us. You know, I'm still having to reach out to people and get that. So that's how I see myself. I'm in a sea of on my own. You know, I'm swimming to somewhere, but I don't know yet. But I'm hoping one day I will get somewhere, and I will find some land, and that I'll be able to call that, you know, my home.
Just on that notion of home, what is it that you are looking for? I know that's a big kind of concept. How would you know when you're there?
I don't know. I think for me, knowing who I am, but I think it may never happen. Maybe my journey of life is to always be searching, and maybe that searching may not be in this world, but maybe in the afterworld. I don't know. For 54 years, I've been trying to find out who I am. I'm still searching. And then I'm thinking, well, I find out who my mum is, and then I find out who my mum is. But will that change anything? I don't know. Wasn't born on country, so I don't have that framing. I don't have a sense of belonging, so I don't know. I mean, all I think for me is to be at peace with myself. That's probably what I wish for the most, to be at peace with myself and to think that I've left a footprint somewhere on this digital space that has made a difference in one person's life. And that to me, I think if my last breath would be that I've made or helped somebody or clarified somebody or given somebody insight, then that to me is something I've achieved. And that's how I look at it.
We've got a couple of final questions. The one is, what's your PhD on?
It's on disrupting heteronormative spaces in the first 3 years of high school settings. So I've narrowed it down to the first 3 years of high school because that is the time when most young people in high school have peer form relationships, where your identity is formed by the way you're perceived by others and your sense of self gets sort of firmly developed. And I wanted to look at that because that's the time when we find that most young people have a sense of, this is who I think I am, have a sense of connecting, and this can set up the for later success in school. And we found that of a lot of young people, if they don't get the support within their peers and their school, because a lot of the times they're trying to search for meaning. You know, you're looking for novels, you're looking for books, and the classroom resources are presented that, you know, you don't have many difference talking, you know, about, you know, or relationships, which is a big thing in early years. The relationships are always predominantly 98% binary, you know, male and female. Anything that's different is seen as difference. And that's difficult for young people. So I want to look at, so for me, it's about building the resource. Well, how do I change? You know, because that's my big thing. The work is, do I write for my audience of people who really accept me? No, because it won't be read. So I'm doing something where I have focus groups of teachers who identify as cisgendered heterosexual. And the focus groups working with them is talking with them to find out how do they use curriculum, how do they work with diversity, what diversity means to them, to kind of, and then to challenge them through that, to see if they can see their unconscious bias in the way they see things. Because I have unconscious bias. The way I see things is through a trans lens. I see things different. So my bias to maybe young male is presenting very stereotypical heterosexual, I may not identify with and be comfortable around with, but I would be more comfortable with a young person who seems to be a little bit more gender fluid, or that, and that relationship. So I need to understand that in terms of how do they select material, you know, in across all areas, because those are the ways to make change, you know, to challenge them, you know, what are their contexts with diverse, working with diverse teachers, you know, until we can find out what the teachers feel like, then we can make change. So I need to work with those allies and build allyship in schools because it's through the allies we know the power of change can resonate and take hold. It's like with truth, treaty, and justice. We need to get the rest of the community to understand what's happened to this country, why sovereignty was never ceded, why do we need a voice to Parliament? These sorts of questions. We need to get people to stand up and say, yes, there has been oppression. Yes, there is systemic racism. It's all about having the allies to identify with the causes and want to walk alongside us, not for us, but walk alongside us to give us the space to make those decisions. And that's sort of where I want to be with the PhD, early stages. But, you know, I think myself, you know, it's like, to me, it's therapeutic. It's if I can't get to teach in that way, maybe I can make a change that can then slowly lead to other forms of change in the future.
Sounds an amazing research. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. My last question I've got for you is, if you could go back in time, what would you say to the younger you?
I would say it's going to be okay. Maybe your life is about, don't focus on trying to fit in. Don't focus on rushing into trying to find yourself. Just let things happen. Just believe in yourself. Because that, to me, had I had that, it might have helped me. Because for so long, I was just trying to find myself. You know, I've been always my whole life, always thinking, when I was young, I hated my life so much, I'd be watching the clock, because I always thought that at the end of each year, the next year would be better. And then I'll be older, and then I'll be wiser. Now it's like, no, don't need to watch the clock. I'm just going to let things happen. Good things will happen to those who seek it.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like our listeners to walk away with from today?
I guess don't judge people, you know, by their skin color. That was, you know, but if someone self-identifies as Indigenous, respect that person. You know, respect their journey. It's their journey. You know, it's not just about finding the piece of paper or the confirmation. You know, that might satisfy you. Not every single person who self-identifies as Indigenous is out to scam, is out to get something, is out to take something away from you. It's not about that. We all deserve the right to know who we are. We didn't choose to be born in the way we're presented. You know, we weren't part of that decision-making process. Just understand that, and just perhaps think to yourself, how can I support that person to be the best person that they can be? And just remember that they're not taking anything away from you. That's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Thank you, Ricki, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll talk again soon. And thanks, guys, for watching. Talk to you guys later. Bye.